Awesome. Well, Amy, thank you so much for joining me for another episode of the Soul Path podcast. I am thrilled to have you here. In reading your bio, I feel like I'm super excited to dive into intuition and all that means, and learn from your experience and insight on that. But to start out the conversation, I'd like to just toss out a little bit of an icebreaker. So I'm going to ask if you would be willing to complete 3 sentences for me. Life is... people are, and I am. Just let it flow out.
Yeah. Life is, I think it's amazing. And is the next one, people are? People are limitless. And Luke, refresh me with the last one.
I am.
I am pure power.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, awesome. That is awesome. So people are limitless. Tell me about that a little bit. What does that mean? How do you see that?
Yeah. And Luke, I want to say thanks for having me. I think this is just such a great match for the work I do. That's exactly the work that I do. Is we are in a time where we're shifting into what I believe is coming to a future where we move out of proving and telling into sharing and into sensing. And so with that limitlessness, it's uncomfortable for people to come into that ability or to realize it, but it's actually a birthright. So in a way, when we start to see that, little examples, and this might seem strange or unique, but I had something that was happening on my hand, a pain, and it was a bubble inside or something was in there that was hard and solid. And I panicked and I got worried about it, just like we do with things that are physical. We think, oh my gosh, what's happening to my body? I'm aging or I'm getting sick. And for about a day and a half, I lamented and I was like, oh my gosh. And I'd get busy with my day and forget. And then I'd feel it when I drive the car, I could feel it. And I'm like, ow. And finally, I gathered myself and I realized all the things that I know from all the years of where I've moved to bring the future forward. Let's say that. I said, no, that's something moving through and out. It's not staying. It's not harboring. It's actually trying to express itself and move through and out. It's telling me something. So relating to our life like that might sound funny, but it creates a lot of flow in our life. It creates natural alignment. I say to my clients and to people, I'm not big on gratitude journals. I'm not against them, but I'm more in the position of the pathway of least resistance. What if we ask ourselves why we aren't naturally grateful and attend to that discomfort to move into the alignment that it takes for us to feel that natural gratitude? So then it's effortless. It becomes easy. That's kind of my line of thinking.
That's awesome. So limitless potential, essentially, kind of opening up to that, I heard you say, is kind of an uncomfortable thing. And then I'm curious, is that directly tied to gratitude?
Well, not necessarily. It's just an example I'm using. But okay. Really with limitlessness, what I would say is our birthright is intuition. And it is something we deny at a high level. We're kind of afraid of it. We don't trust it. And the reason is it is non-time bound, non-linear. And so unlike our society that's like, you got to prove it. Well, I've seen a lot of things proven in medical care, in food, and they don't actually come out to be what they were once they were proven to be safe for us. And these things happen. I'm not saying they're bad guys and we're good guys. There's none of that. It's just that when we take the approach of intuition, the limitlessness is we get the information and then we walk this awkward journey, which could be the discomfort. And in hindsight, we see that information, what it really was about, what makes sense about it. And so the answer is in hindsight, and the trust is what carries us forward to that thing, which is undeniably true. And the bigger piece of this, of our limitlessness, is we all have claircognizance, which is clear knowing. And to me, the core of my work is about and I'm big with children, I'm like, let's not screw them up. But if we keep children with their knowing, and parents don't, it's not culturally in America and in most countries, most kids feel misunderstood through parenting. But if we keep our kids with their knowing, they're going to align, they're going to be naturally grateful, they're going to be naturally respectful. And that's how I raise my kids. Now, to do that, I felt for 2 years like I was breaking in two and I didn't know why. But this limitless piece is power. And what I was breaking free of was control and enabling, which are on the outer edges, which is kind of codependency and narcissism. Mm-hmm. But I didn't know that. And so I could have said at a party where you should be happy and fine, I am breaking inside and it is breaking me. Like I can barely stand here. It was so hard, but I did it. And I knew with open eyes, the goal was to be not only the opposite of a parent with my children or the opposite of a friend to my friend, how my parents showed me, but to break free of something I couldn't even see. And so when we head in that middle space, that's where the balancing point is. And that's where the power is. And it wasn't until 8 years after I was working this pathway, I realized that, I broke free of that structure and moved into the power. And that's where it can become uncomfortable. Some people can flow a little better, but we are creating a new structure, a new way of thinking and being. And it's lost on us a little bit. And part of it is, to me, Luke, it is so simple that it becomes really, like, we make it so complex. We overlook the simplicity of it, and it becomes something that is complex because it's so darn simple.
Absolutely. Wow. That's an incredible realization, I think, to be able to see it as moving through the discomfort. I would say it's like letting go or losing that illusion. When we have to create structure, because structure supports successful spontaneity, but it is all transient. It isn't holding on to a rigid idea of what it means to be a parent or any other role that we might play. I was curious, I think you said the word opposite, right? Like it's opposite of being a parent, it's opposite of being a friend. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Absolutely. So it's characteristic for humans, and you're exactly what you're talking about. So intuition, when my intuition came in strong, and you might have to remind me about coming back to that question, but I want to say this first, Luke, is when mine came in strong, I am fierce, and I'm somebody who I'm not going to do it unless I can do it at the highest level. It's just how I'm built. I always worked for the best company that did that thing. And so I said to the universe, and I shook my fist in the sky and I swore, and I said, if you effing want me to do this, you better show me the foundation, the definition, and exactly what I'm doing. Otherwise, forget it. And so the information came, and what came is that we are, I'm losing my train a little bit where I wanted to head with this, but we are non-time bound, non-linear, so on. All this information about how intuition works. This is what I was going to say, is intuition is based on if everything is connected, which everybody says everything's connected, but they only have half of that wording. So I waited, and the information that came is if everything is connected, therefore there is nothing which cannot be connected. Which, if you'll notice, if we say everything's connected, that's intuition. That is non-linear, non-time bound. It is not a logic statement. But when you add that back end, that's what brings it full circle, is the logic, which logic is really important in our society. But this piece of intuition is sort of thrown to the side. But if we have that whole, it sounds mamby-pamby or silly. I don't know if that's even an appropriate word to say, but silly, right? Like, everything's connected. Oh, shut up. Right? It gets a little trite. But if we look at it in that parameter, if everything is connected, therefore there's nothing which cannot be connected. To your point of structure, it's actually a web. So I may see something, I'm clairvoyant foremost. I can smell, taste, do all the things. I have all the senses with it, this ability to understand energy and read energy. But when it comes to seeing things, I might see three things that are seemingly random. The example I usually give is a little white shoe turned to its side with its laces open, and it's sitting on the grass. There's a piece of cake with a bite out of it, and the fork is strewn, and a little lovey that's an elephant all loved up and sitting on its side in the grass as well. And I look and I look and I look and I sense and say, what are those three things? How do those come together? But then if I change my point of view and I'm drawn to looking up and forward ahead, there's a kid ripping her clothes off, running out to the woods because mom said you have to have a bite of cake before you leave. You have to take your clothes off because you can't wear your nice white things out to the forest or out to the woods. And the kid trusted the woods more than that lovey. Like, they didn't need safety. And I asked the universe, give me an example I can share with people. And that's what came, is give them this example of how if we change our point of reference, we can make the connections. So to me, I don't think there needs to be structure because structure already exists. And it's actually letting go of the need for structure in a way, or the need for control, or the need to know what's going to happen. Now, with humanity, a massive piece of anxiety is people don't know where they stand. And so they're jumping through other people's hoops. I actually call it hoop jumping. Like I have a kid who she'd never do the worksheet in school, in high school, but she'd do the really hard writing and reading assignment. And she'd do it about 3 times faster than her peers and she'd get an A. And it dawned on me, she is living the pathway of least resistance. It's not actually effective to tell her, you know, you're going to have to do things in life you don't like. Why would that have to be true for her? So we dislodge from that structure to say, how is that working for you? How do you feel about that? So I had kids come home who got a D on a test and could get an A. And I said, how do you feel about that? Well, really good, because the other kids got an F. I did really well compared to the class. The teacher's going to reevaluate and give us the test again. We don't always know the answer. We see a D, we judge that that's bad, right? That's part of the structure that I think is not necessarily helpful to us. But if we look at it in a way of the points aren't linear, you got a D, that's not good. Well, no, a D might not be good, but if we ask the question, we've entertained all of these other pieces for the child to decide and realign for themselves. Or a kid could get a D and say, so what do you need? To study harder. I didn't put a lot of effort. How can I support you? Right? It lifts the child and lets them know, mom will support me. But oftentimes the child, knowing they have support, will come back to themselves or the adult and say, I got it covered. And they'll take that active role of responsiveness to their life versus responsibility for like, well, I have to do this. That becomes about martyrdom. It becomes about the weight and heaviness of our burden as humans. And that's, I believe, imposed. Luke, are you okay?
This is great. I've got a high schooler as well. And it's interesting, you know, if she comes home and she's like, oh, you know, I did terrible on a test or whatever, you know, well, tell me about it. What's going on? Oh, I just feel like I struggle on this, or I didn't get that right, or I didn't get the grade I wanted, and say, oh, okay, you know, so how do you feel about that? You know, I feel like this and that, you know, well, you know, do you feel like a huge embarrassing failure? Like, is this, you know, like, does that discredit you in any way, shape, or form, kind of a thing, and actually make light of it? Like, you're still just as incredible as a human being, right? You're still you have the same potential. All of these little nonlinear setbacks, you know, the unexpected things that crop up, the chaos, whether it's a kid and a test or a business deal that falls through, or, you know, our life is, as I see it, you know, this kind of perpetual unfolding collision, if you will, of my personal choice or my efforts to manifest my intentions in the material world, right? So I have choice, and I can make a choice to do this or do that. I can choose to use change to be a catalyst for change. And in doing so, facilitate and cultivate a lifestyle, if you will, or cultivate a quality of life. But at the same time that I'm out there actively asserting, you know, this is my intention and what I want to intend, you know, my intention is to have a maximum positive impact, right? I want to help lift up as many people as I can in this lifetime. That's it. No more, no less. But I understand that my choices and my intention has to be, you know, it's going to be affected by the collision of, you know, random chaos, essentially, right? So there are things that are in motion and out of my control at all times. So letting go of the expectation that just because I think this is what I'm going to do means that this is what's actually going to happen, right? And this is how I reconcile my mind to what I consider natural reality, right? It's not what Luke thinks. It's not what Luke's perception of reality. It's not even the image of reality that I'm projecting. It's that there is life that exists outside of me, and I'm part of that. And there's this, what I call the divine dance. You know, my intuition, my inspiration, my intention is in this cosmic dance with the intuition, inspiration, and intention of other human beings, of other creatures, of, you know, plant life, the cycles of the sun and the moon and everything else. So it's kind of this cool thing. So the dance is a cool thing, despite the chaos, despite the things that seem like, oh, was this not meant to be? Well, how could it be any other way? So clearly, right. It is what it is. Serendipity. Right.
Well, in a way, Luke, but I guess what I'm speaking to is a little bit beyond that, where we can say we create our reality, but I think that's a lot of pressure. And I think some people can get down because when we have a lot of chaos, or there are a lot of moving parts in life right now, we're transitioning from a hyper level of doing and a hyper level. Like, I believe we are dismantling narcissism and bringing it down. And so as a result, we're experiencing truly utter chaos, but it's okay because it's shifting us to something that is much more likened to who we are. So I would say out to the people who feel distressed right now, or they feel a bit depressed or a bit anxious or can't reconcile and confusion is in them, you're the way forward. And that's the problem that you're having, is you're watching how it is and you never probably really fit that. You felt different, and it's because you know how it will look in the future. But for me, what I would say to you is, the less said, the better. Just with children, with ourselves, the more quiet we are, the more we're going to see the truth of it. And also, like, we can accept that this is an experience we're having. And we can say, like, right now I'm having an experience in my life. I don't like it. But I just say, and I swear, so I won't do that here, but I say, I don't effing like this. And I will do this, but I don't like it. So I claim that for myself as a way to remember I will go through the motions of my knowing and headed in the direction I'm to head, to do the thing I came here to fulfill. Like we say, what's my life purpose? We came to fulfill some things. And whether that's in part beauty or so on, that piece of the chaos is, the more we can find that to be quiet and aligned to where we are headed, the more synchronicity comes. That's just amazing. It's like, Luke, you were in such a hurry and you were running and you were like getting a little bit stressed about being in such a hurry. And then you ended up at the school to meet the kids or whatever it is. And you pull in and there's a parking space right in the front, right there, where the kids can see you. So you don't have to call them because there's no cell service in the school, all the things, right? That's when synchronicity starts connecting in for us. And that's how we know we are aligning to that knowing and we are not getting in our own way. It's really good right now. And I want to come back to something that I call this myth. It's kind of like a myth buster, but the energy is really good right now for us if we stay in a space of trust, even if we're completely lacking trust in where we're headed or what's going on, because there is a lot of chaotic energy going on, which is okay. It's fleshing things out. We're going to hit really well. We're going to stay in our alignment without really trying very hard. If we're just like, you know what, I'm going to press the trust button. Oh, I hate this. But you know what? Press the trust button. Focus there. And our journey right now is not to focus way ahead in our life, but like one city block ahead of us. That's as much as we can handle. And this has come around recently for me in readings, which it hasn't been around for quite a few years. But it's this idea, which is kind of cheesy, but I had to name it a certain way. So there's the myth, there's the old belief, and then there's the mystery. And that can be part of the discomfort that we're talking about, where I think of it as, we all remember being 13. Who can forget it, right? But what happens is your hormones are going crazy. Your body gets out of proportion and you bump into things. Like your body, you're not in control of it, sort of. And that's how I think of this part that is the mystery, where we're disconfigured or we're malconfigured for a moment while we're re-entertaining a new belief system. And what will happen during that time is we might call a friend and be like, yeah, let's meet for coffee. And then they call, they're like, oh my gosh, we had a last minute funeral from this friend's friend and I have to, whatever. Then the next week you try and meet for coffee again and they can't meet you again. When you see those things happening and you're in this discombobulated state, what's really going on is the universe or God or source or whatever you want to call it is protecting us from them informing us anything about our new belief. So there will be people that are kind of get shut out, or it seems really strange. But once we catch up to that new belief, we hit the miracle. And people around us will align to us or they will fall away. So if your problem was overwhelm, you formed this new belief about overwhelm and dismantled what it was before, and you get into this situation of being like, I got it now. And you might not even realize what you've got, but something changed and you feel a little bit different. People around you might be saying, I feel so overwhelmed. They're catching up to the speed of where you are now. And that's how we know. Some people will come with you, and sometimes some people have to fall away because they haven't figured that out and they can't hit or meet you energetically, but they aren't even aware of it. It's all behind the scenes. So I want to focus on the experience. We're having an experience, and we can claim that sometimes that's trash. That's just crap. Like, that experience is no fun whatsoever. But I've had a lot of experiences. I mean, since I was very little.
I want to jump into. I want to ask about your kind of the origin story, if you will, of your own intuitive journey. but just real quick before we get to that, can you elaborate a little bit on, you had used the word response and responsibility. Mm-hmm. And those two words, was that a contrast between the two, or how do you see those inner?
Yeah, no, it's really important. And Luke, this came around many years ago for me when I was doing readings, actively, where there are two words. There's expectations and responsibility, and that those hung out in an area of control. And I think it's easy to relate it to parenting or having a boss who controls you versus a boss who flows with you and helps you rise higher. And so the message that came, or the messages, were, instead of responsibility, it's responsiveness to our life. We want to teach kids, and we want to manage people in a way that they are responsive to the things that are going on. Because if we have that space of you aren't responsible, we're again burdening children instead of saying, be responsive. For me, when my kids were, 12, 13, I said to them, hey, if you ever go to a party and you're drinking, or you're with kids that are doing drugs or drinking, I want you to be responsive and tune into that situation and see where you're falling in. And I want you to react or act in alignment to that. So meaning, I was asking my kids to tune into their intuition, so that if they felt something was wrong there, they would leave. And they'd tell their friends, I need to leave. You can come with me, or you can call, whatever the deal is. Like, make a plan so that they stay in touch with that, knowing their intuition. So responsiveness allows us a more free flow with that. Now, expectations is met on the other side with expectancy. And I don't necessarily mean one is good or bad. It just, if we're talking about living spiritually and living the experience that's a more pathway of least resistance, being expectant is going to be a more powerful place. It's the kid who opens the gift and doesn't even really care what's in there, in the way of, they're just excited about everything. I got a gift. Look at that. Oh, you know what? Do you like that? You can actually have that. It's just this open-heartedness. And you think about it, a way to lock that in is when we think about a pregnant mama who has no clue what's going to happen and how their life will change. They're just so excited. Oh my gosh, what's going to happen? Right? They just are excited. They're expectant. Instead of having an expectation of, well, you didn't meet my expectation, that again forces people, I believe, to do this hoop jumping. And I believe it's what creates a lot of anxiety. They're trying to be something they don't even know necessarily how to be it.
Right. Yeah. Being and doing that, those are things that we could dive into. So just to clarify, when you're talking about being responsive and responsiveness, would you say that that's similar to, or even synonymous with, openness? Being open and receptive?
Sort of. It's more in the lane of your own life.
Okay.
So you be responsive to your life. I will be responsive to my life. I am not responsive to your life unless we talked about doing a podcast together. So then there's some responsiveness about, you might need this information from me, and I ask the question, and you might have a question for me to be,
right.
We're responsive to each other. So it's only within what is pertaining to our life. We don't need to be responsive to a crisis that happens in another country, because there might be no way to be responsive to that. And if we start to go there, it may become guilt or worry and some things that actually are useless behaviors as a human.
Ultimately going to weigh it down, bring down the vibe. Yeah, absolutely. So is there a connection then in your mind, would you consider us as individuals, each person in their own path, like you were saying, responsible for our responsiveness?
Right. That's the only thing you're responsible for.
Okay. All right. I love it.
Woo, is your responsiveness.
Yeah. How we choose, have we elevated our awareness? Are we aware of how we are responding? Mm-hmm. And that we have some choice in that matter to be open and non-judgmental, to be accepting of the circumstances, not fighting against it, not, expecting it to be differently and resisting life as it unfolds, but instead being present with life, the gift of life. And in that present state awareness, that's where I think, like you were saying, you notice the shoe, you notice the fork, you notice the little things. In my paradigm, life is always talking to me. There's always something going on that is speaking wisdom into my life, or insight, or direction, or, inspiration. And just yesterday morning, I was sitting out drinking coffee, and there's Western bluebirds, really beautiful birds, and they had disappeared for a while. They had been nesting, and now they've hatched. And so there are 3 little baby birds, and the mama bird was out there, and she's, getting bugs. And, at first she's putting the bugs in the other baby bird's mouth. And then pretty soon she's like getting the bugs and she's setting it in front of the baby bird. So the baby bird has to go over, and then pretty soon she's showing them how to go find the bugs. And I'm watching this and I'm thinking, wow, this is so cool. This is just like it is, with our own children, right? We got to teach them how to feed themselves, so to speak. But for me at that point in time, that contemplation, I was thinking about it at a larger scale. And that was, teaching people how to find nourishment for their own soul, or how to feed their own personal growth, and I could see that. And it was like teaching people how to hunt for food, kind of a thing. Anyway, just a small example. Let's transition to your story specifically. There's something I think is super awesome. I want to hear you tell it, so I'm not going to say it. But in reading your bio, I don't know if you would call it your spiritual journey, but your awakening or your intuition really started with a pretty remarkable experience circa age 7. Is that right? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Absolutely. It came kind of wildly for me, but beautifully. I think when I was young, really beautifully. So I was not the favorite kid in class in first grade, not at all. And there were 3 times that we were in the middle of a spelling test and I was mentally checked out. I just wasn't there. I mean, people may say you had ADD and so on, but I really feel it was this spiritual attunement to knowing this isn't the way that I learn. This isn't the way I do it. And there's a different way that's easier for me. That seems resistant, but that's what I really see. So I was sitting in the classroom the 3rd time and the teacher came over and she shook my shoulder and she screamed at me and said, "What are you doing?" Bah! It just left her panicked clearly. And I looked beyond her out the classroom window across the room, and I was out there floating beyond the window. And next to me was a yogi that was dressed in white, and it was a man with a turban, legs crossed, floating next to me. And I had no clue what a yogi was, but I knew that felt safer than being in the classroom. And I had that awareness, but I thank God I said nothing, because it would have been a really bad situation. They would have thought I was more weird and different than they already did. But I looked around the classroom to see that the kids had been on spelling word 8. I mean, I really had checked out. And I think, there's a lot more to that I'm not going to go into here. But needless to say, like many people, when I was a teenager or in middle school, I could finish my friend's sentence, or I knew what they were going to say before they said it. Now I can watch TV shows, a half an hour show, and I know that guy's going to have a heart attack. This is going to happen way before, see it way before. I just can sense off of these people how they're behaving in very tiny ways. So that's how it's amplified for me to some degree, to give it a concrete way to think about it. But when I was 16 and 21, I saved my moped from being stolen, and I caught the meter maid right before, when they used to do that. Now it's all digital, but right before they were going to write the ticket. And I yelled, hey, I see you, I'm coming with the money. And they said, had I put the pen down, I would have had to write the ticket. You caught me exactly at the right time. And I was in a meeting in a city where my body stood up without me doing it. And that's a bigger conversation. So I won't talk about how that happens or why that happens. It's not a scary thing. It certainly was okay. But I believe that those things happened to teach me when I was in my 20s. I was having a lot of premonitions or seeing things before they happened that were not of any consequence. But I believe in the long run, it was to teach me this is good and it will serve people. It's not scary and it's not bad. Why would I feel more safe with the yogi outside the classroom than being in the classroom with the teacher who's screaming at me? Those were just some hallmarks to tell me this is okay. Because as it came in when I was about 27, I had a premonition that I would die when I was 34. Spoiler alert, I'm way older than that. But I didn't know what it meant. And it really, not many people have an extraordinarily fear-based situation happen with their intuition, but the people who do, it's simply to get you to pay attention to it. It's not something bad is going to happen. It's really time for you to take this under your wing and really learn how it works.
So almost like it's an invitation to take responsibility to your intuition, for your intuition. I mean, maybe that's one way of looking at it.
Well, it's time to expand it. I think that people that have those experiences, like I've worked with some kids who had some really crazy experiences. I mean, kind of perverse, not sexual, but very young. And all I need to say to them is, in 2 years, the reader inability you'll be to understand this. And they're like, oh, I get it. It might be scary now, but in 2 years, I'm going to see bigger, scarier things, but I will understand this and I will understand that. And they calm down and they center. They get it right away. So I think that, it can come with some hurdles that are like, what's going on? I mean, to see that you're going to die in a few years is really alarming.
Right.
And didn't have anywhere to turn. Like, I didn't know who to talk to. And for my journey, I asked for teachers and I had influences, but I never had a teacher come forward. And I believe that was of purpose because I learned it clean. And now I teach people how to do it. I don't even really teach them. I show them a passive way for them to learn their own way of doing it.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Very cool. So I'm curious about the, kind of go back for a sec to the yogi outside the window experience. I was going to ask if you had any exposure to yoga prior to that, if anybody in your family was doing yoga or anything like that. It was just a kind of a spontaneous whoa, but nevertheless a very visceral experience, I'm guessing.
Absolutely. And it's when I see things, it's the essence of the imprint of the energy. So it wasn't like I see you right now, Luke, live and here. It's a sense, but I can actually, my brain can configure the shape and the sense of what all of that is. Like if I had known enough, but I was young, I probably could have tuned in and had a nonverbal conversation with that energy and found out, oh, okay. So push comes to shove much later in my life. One of my friends is a Vedic astrologer, which is East Indian, or, it's
I am. Yeah.
And she said, Amy, you have so much Vedic energy in your chart. And that's probably now why that showed up for me. And I don't really know much about that, but I've never studied yoga. I mean, I've done yoga, but I knew nothing about, I didn't really know anything about any other country. I was 7.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Have you heard of or studied at all the cities? They're called cities in yoga. They're essentially spiritual gifts. Something that's fascinating to me is you look through all the different traditional lineages, right up to and including, New Ageism, and just look at what anything, that embraces spirituality, that embraces metaphysics, metaphysical reality. There's spiritual gifts across the board, and they're a little bit different here, a little bit different there. Patanjali in the Yoga Sutras lines out roughly 25 different cities, and these would be considered spiritual gifts, but really ultimately it's skill that can be attained on the level of personal evolution, if you will. I like to talk about self-directed evolution or self-cultivation. So that we have latent capacity to be clairvoyant, clairaudient, all of these different things. I associate those with the stories that are told that have been passed down from the sages through the ages. And, anecdotally, the stories are alive and well today. And through personal experience, seeing and experiencing these things, it is an undeniable aspect of our reality. So in the yoga cities, one of the yoga supernatural powers, even though it's a natural thing, would be levitation, teleportation, the ability to kind of move again in a non-linear fashion, right? Get out of the logical, I have to understand it, and just understand that there are things that we don't understand. Even, as much as modern culture likes to claim, this is what the science says. The science is always shifting. The science itself is very transient, and science contradicts itself, and science changes constantly. So, and science in many ways is just catching up with technology, I would say human technology that has been around for thousands of years, through traditional Chinese medicine, through Qigong, Kung Fu, through yoga, all of this kind of stuff. It's amazing. And without having to understand it, without having to put a label on it, the truth is people like yourself and those who have that, they're born with that innate sensitivity and intuition. You've been experiencing this in your life from the time that you were a child. And it's right. It's
right. I was highly aligned as a child. Magic stuff happened for me.
Mm.
I stuck out, and I'd be at the grocery store and somebody would say, the moms would be talking, and they'd pause and I'd sum it up with wisdom. And they'd be like, holy moly, she's really wise. But I didn't really understand that. And, with what you're saying, Luke, about the cities and all this is, to me, it's not a gift. It's actually an ability. And so somebody can be really talented at playing the piano, but they can choose to never play the piano. But that gift can't be taken away. Now, you can say, well, somebody's hands could get hurt and then they can't play anymore. But we still have the music inside of us. It still is a part of who we are. And so instead of saying it's a gift, and I know why I have it so strongly, and it's not something that's exactly pretty and sweet. So that's odd. It's different. I'm a bit different that way. But I would rather say it's the invitation. Like when I had the intense thing that came when I was 27 that said, you will die when you're 34, it was a massive invitation to be like, heads up, you're going to deal with your intuition now. And you're going to put everything that you are to it. And then I couldn't fight that. If I did fight that, it's like things would get trickier for me. Mentally, I'd move further away from my knowing and my ability to manifest, how I do naturally. That magic that's a part of who I am seems to hide and not shine. So it's pretty easy for us to tell where to attend in our life but again, a lot of it takes quiet. I mean, I say in parenting, the biggest thing we need to learn, and I had to learn it, is shut up. Say the first thing that comes out of your mouth and then stop. I don't like it when you leave tea bags on the edge of the sink. Stop. They know the rest, right? Or whatever it is, it's like we're quick to have to make words for it and justify it or build a foundation. And I think that it's a little bit more simple than that. Sorry, I have a cat that's moving around and he's going to sneeze maybe. So what is the invitation? And that's what I would tell the listeners is, what is your invitation? And it can be a gentle, easy, back and forth volley. What is your invitation? And how do you attend to that through being responsive? Stay in your lane, right? I was told years ago, I had learned Qigong we have a master where I live, and he's really well achieved. And I went to level 3 and I kind of did it begrudgingly. But then I learned what I needed to learn at level 3, and then my own intuitive ability filled in the rest. And I could do healings that, like, I had a woman who had a cancer tumor in her liver. I did a healing on her. She had a scan the next day and it was half the size. Now, that might sound miraculous, but I knew what to do. And then I was told, don't heal people. You know now, but I needed that information and the foundation of how that works to understand how to teach people. And for me, I work with people with career and relationships. And my sweet spot is I can go all the way to their hell with them. And I am not one iota afraid. It doesn't bother me. Like, I can go to a very dark place with people and help them see and rise up to the highest extent of who they are. And that takes me having a really, really big shadow in order to deal with all the thousands of people I've read with and help understand them.
I was going to ask, would you attribute that capacity to having walked through your own hell?
Yeah. I mean, I think I was born even, I've done some somatic work and so on, that pregnant in my mom's belly in the second trimester, I wanted out. I was her 5th child, her 8th pregnancy, and I moved a ton. And when I've revisited that, I was trying to get out. I was like, I don't want to be here. And what unfolded is my mom is my greatest teacher, the most challenging person I will probably ever meet on earth, let's hope. But that taught me things. There's no other way I could have learned. I couldn't have gone to a school. I couldn't have ever gotten that education. And it heightened my intuition. So if I go to a psychologist to do some therapy, they're like, holy crap, slow down. They'll tell me something that seats in, and a week later, I have filled in all the pieces and I say it to them and they're like, it's like you wrote the textbook on that idea, or that, I assimilate quickly as a result of growing up in a home where I constantly had to be aware and 29 steps ahead. And still, even then, it wasn't sometimes workable, right? But that's a good thing, because look at what it yielded. I mean, I have thousands of people who have said to me, like, you changed my life. I would have gone through that hell again to do that for people. That's what we're about, is helping people see their own bright light. And for me, helping them move on to where they really see the truth about themselves, we forget. It's so simple, the truth of who we are, your skill set, what you're about. We just forget from all of that. To me, that responsibility or the things that burden us. Maybe responsibility doesn't burden some people and they like that, but you get where I'm headed. So how do we invite ourselves to be a part of our life?
Yeah. And along with that, what is life inviting us to, right? I look at, every moment is an opportunity. It's limitless, right? There's limitless potential. There's opportunity to express. There's opportunity to just experience and absorb, or to be absorbed just by being present. We don't have to be doing. We can just simply be being, and that is a very beautiful thing. That is where centeredness comes from, groundedness comes from. That's where we get out of the head and into the heart, or we elevate and expand our inner awareness, our spiritual awareness. This is where wisdom and inspiration come from. And I do believe through my own experience, that this is where the discernment of intuition comes from, right? So intuition is a really interesting ability. Our faculty, if you will. And there are people that have the mindset that, intuition is simply just subconscious stuff percolating out. There are people that a school of thought that is, intuition is, essentially metaphysical messaging, that we're picking up on transmission from other dimensions. It could be one or the other or both. It could be something entirely different. Maybe it's quantum physics and the in and the out of the, this and the that. Ultimately, each person has to figure out how to navigate their own intuition. Am I listening to my intuition, or am I just listening to a voice in my head, right? That's the big question that a lot of people have, especially when they're just kind of coming into this realization that intuition is a real deal. It is something. It is something that we can tune into. It is something that we can train. But how? And I want you to speak to that. I look forward to hearing from you on that. But I'm curious, before we jump straight into that, can you actually kind of alluded to it earlier about the premonition that you were going to die at 34. Obviously, it didn't happen. So can you share, maybe that's a good story, or maybe there's a different story. Tell me about a time where your intuition felt strong, but proved to be inaccurate or even wrong.
Right. It never has, even with the 34. The problem is, and this is a lot of the problem of what you're talking about, is with our intuition, it's about trust. So I was not, even though I had experienced a lot of things, I didn't get how it worked when I saw that premonition at 27. And so as a result, enough information that I realized it's a metaphor. And all of this information comes in metaphor. Remember, it's not linear logical. And so when I saw the 34, the number, it just hung in the air. And it was in a very, very old serif font. I mean, a font I've never seen in this lifetime, never. And it was painted in a red, old, like egg tempera, right? We wouldn't have that in this time. Not very, I mean, maybe the Russians with icons, I don't know. But needless to say, there was this sense of death, and I felt like I was going to die. You've woken up in the morning, everybody has, almost everybody, where you had something happen in a dream that you feel the emotion of it all day, right? Whether it's sadness, happiness, joy, it was the same thing. I felt this overwhelming burden about death. But I still don't know what the full message is about that metaphor, but I know I will. And I will never forget the question. And that's the magic is, if I need to know what that's about, the information will come to pass. Now, years ago, I was sitting on the phone with a friend of mine, and it was like a brick hit my chest. And I knew something about that metaphor and about that message that I didn't know before, but I can't articulate to you what it is. But I know it had to do with that because it felt akin.
So at age 27, you had the premonition, and it was it something that, like you said, you carried the weight of that for a while?
Well, I freaking panicked.
Okay. Yeah.
Freaked out. Because, Luke, you got to think about it. In my 20s, premonitions were coming, and I'd say to my husband, we're going to be at a coffee shop and a book is going to fall off the table. And then 2 weeks later, that would happen. And he'd look at me, right? He's a very quiet person. And then I'd say something else. This is going to happen, right? So it was hard for me. And at 27, I started to ask the questions, oh, how do I turn this on and off? How do I build the foundation for this? And by the time I was about 33, it started to make sense to me. And the energy of the worry of it, the death, I really think it's a spiritual rebirth. And I don't even know that it's really happened. I'm not sure what the 34 really attends to. I thought maybe it was 34 years after this, or I've tried to think about things, but really it's not worth it because the answer will come. Mm-hmm. And I might be blocking the answer when I'm looking for it. It might be right there. So to go back to your other question, our problem with intuition is trust. And I'm going to shoot us forward 20, 40, 50 years. Where we're headed, I believe, is to a less invasive positioning for medical care and for how we operate in the world. So it would look like this. I've stood in a room with 100 people to public speak, and I said to them, hey, this is how it will look in the future. You and I, we have something that we need to share with each other. We will know each other for 2 years, and then our relationship will lapse and will be complete. And you and I will never know each other. Hi and bye, because we'll know. So there won't be hurt feelings because it won't be like, why doesn't Jenny like me anymore? Right? So there won't be that emotional piece that we've been struggling with. And there's a reason we've been struggling with that. It has a lot to do with narcissism being so strong. But the other piece is a woman came to my knitting group that I run, and she said, she had just had a baby, and she said, they don't really do amniocentesis anymore, which, if is kind of dangerous for the baby and the mom and the whole situation, but it's to tell if there's anything genetically predisposed for the child or there's a problem going on. And she said, now they can take a pint of blood from the mom and centrifugally remove the child cells from the mom's cells and genetically test those. And I sat back for a second and I said, that's a lot less invasive and safer. They're finally kind of thinking about how this could be better. And it hit me because I'm kind of asking that all of a sudden I could see 4 midwives standing in front of a woman who was sitting on an exam table. And one of them said, you're pregnant with a girl, you're measuring this. You're pregnant with a boy, you're measuring this. The 2 in the middle had conflicting answers. Nobody had the same answer exactly. And then when they did the diagnostic tests, that woman was pregnant with twins. She was measuring in at the average of all of their scores that they came up with, right? Everything tracked, but they didn't know how it hit. And so then I was like, okay, this is great. That is way less invasive. And then we have the tests to back it up to prove so that we can say, I'm hitting well. And then it fast forwarded to one midwife standing in front of a pregnant person. Their skill set for that was very high. And they could say, you're pregnant with a boy. This is how you're measuring, blah, 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 blah. Somebody else came in and did all the diagnostics. They were right on. And then it flipped to a delivery room where the person was having a problem. The midwife was able to tune in intuitively and knew exactly what to do to change the situation without anything that was invasive. So to me, that's an example of how intuition is so powerful, but it takes repetition. It's taken me, that's why it started, I believe, so young for me. So I would trust it because I am feisty. I got a gray streak in my hair when I was 17. It showed up out of the blue, right? And I'm like, what is that? Why? And then finally, when I was 33 or so, I was like, they marked me. They're like, watch that one. She is trouble. Like she's going, push the bar on everything. So to me, even in 2013, which isn't so long ago, I sat in front of a group of 5 people and I was going to read individually for each of them, but in front of each other. And I literally said to them, can I do this SHIT? Naughty, in front of them. Because I'm like, this is ridiculous. How can I do this? And I hit right on with all of them, right? Just like knocking down all the pins. How could anybody know that much about thousands of people? Right? And the more I do it, the better and tighter I get. I've even said to clients when I was newer at it, I don't care if you want to know. I want to hijack your reading right now and take this further because I care so much to understand the core of this for you and understand how to get to the core of things for my clients so that they really can heal. They really can get back to themselves or whatever it is that they need. So
that's good stuff. That's gold. In your experience, I hear you say trust a lot. I want to share with you I like to use acronyms a lot. So my acronym for faith is following an intuitive, trusting heart. So following an intuitive, trusting heart means not so much I have to have it figured out, not so much I have to see it all because I trust that even though I can't figure it all out, even though I can't see the future per se, I can feel and sense and navigate my way through life intuitively. This is what keeps me in the flow state. And it only is accessible to me, at least in my experience, when I get out of my head and I'm into my heart, right? The sensing has to come from the center of our being, not through the mental projections of who we think we are. So, but that does segue to following an intuitive, trusting heart, how we or what we trust, right? Like when you talk about trusting your intuition, can you describe that in a way without using trust and intuition, essentially? You know what I mean? Like, what does that mean exactly to the layperson?
Luke, you actually spoke to it right here. So well done. I mean, you're not realizing you are, but discernment is a massive piece because that comes from our knowing, which is claircognizant in our heart field. And everybody is intuitive in two ways. They have claircognizance, which is our heart field, and clairsentience, which is our gut instinct. It's that solar plexus in, where we get squishy under our rib cage. And we can sense into those things. We're at a party and we sense, I am not going over there. That's our gut saying, Now our heart field, I actually teach a class called Tools of the Heart. And our heart field, what I've learned is we can send a message out and we can receive messages through our heart. So when I said to you, my body moved without me moving it for the parking ticket, that's how it did it, is something sent a message to my heart and it moved my body. So we can respond. It's not that we can control people and it gets weird, but with claircognizance, we really are naturally going to sense and read things. So if people are more like a healer type, just by their nature, they're on a road trip, they're driving past towns, and all of a sudden they're like, something is really wrong with that town. That is their heart field picking it up. And then they research when they get back to, use Google to figure it out. And they're like, oh, they had a plant that exploded or something happened and the people are really sick. And it's not visually apparent, but they knew. So that's what we say with the heart is knowing. Mm-hmm. And I really want to point out that intuition is not thinking or feeling, even though we use the word feeling a lot with intuition, it is sensing. Mm-hmm. Like I said, it's the essence of the imprint of the energy that I see. And I've gotten good at it. So I can see that is a coffee cup, but that's my coffee cup at home with little cats on it. Or that's a Starbucks cup. But I can tell it's a cup and then it narrows, right? We can do that. Mm-hmm. The other thing that I think is tricky, and I would really encourage people, is when you go to bed at night, it's easier at first to be in a little bit of a quieter state. So just before you're falling asleep, close your eyes and ask to see or experience something that has to do with your intuition. Now, the first time I asked that, I saw a flash of orange, and I was like, that is stupid. Right? I was like, what? But the thing is, we need to ask questions, and that is our manual transmission, is like, we can put it into first gear, we can put it into second gear by asking questions. And for me, when I told you the thing about the 3 items on the ground, mm-hmm. I said I had to alter my point of view, which takes experience. I couldn't tell. I was so focused on those 3 things and they were driving me nuts, which I could be so focused on the 34. What does that even mean? I'm driving myself nuts and I'm not altering my point of view, right? are. It could be spiritual matters. It could be ways of thinking. And we're sharing ways to up level the ways to think about living spiritually so that it is the pathway of least resistance. I want it to be easiest for you and show you, this, you can flow through most everything.
That is such a beautiful, I had a mental image of, fellowship, really. You know what I mean? Coming together, it's intimacy, it's intimate connection, intimacy. Let's let down the walls, the self-protection mechanisms, the ego, and just be raw, be real, and connect from the heart. And that is so much the heart of the Soul Path podcast, is to create that safe space. I have wonderful conversations and interviews with people that are all across the spectrum from different backgrounds and all that kind of stuff. Why? Because every person has to walk their own path, and I have personally experienced, this and that, but I can live almost vicariously, if you will, or I can experience through somebody else's story and experience the wisdom and insight that they've gained. And if I can, then I know other people can as well. And I really resonate with what you're doing there. The vision of my heart was to create a Heathen House fellowship, right? And that's, gathering for seekers, for sinners, and for spiritual skeptics. But it's the place to come and talk about the things that you don't talk about necessarily at the dinner table, and that kind of stuff. So it's just, it's super awesome to see that. Now, we're coming up on the clock, but there's actually one thing that it keeps coming up for me. And so I want to say this, okay? I want to ask, I'm curious. I want to hear from you on this. The idea of interpretation, how we interpret our intuition, because you alluded to this, you said this just a second ago, how do I know that I'm not just I'm a really creative person. I could just create this up in my mind, right? I realized a long time ago, I can convince myself of anything. You know what I mean? Like if I really wanted to, I could be completely convinced about this or that, only to later find out that I was wrong. And I think anybody that's lived any amount of time in life ultimately realizes that at some point we think something, we're so sure we believe it through and through, but we're wrong. And then it's like, wait a second. Even though I was so sure and I believed it absolutely, I was wrong. So can you speak to the interpretation of intuition within that framework a little bit?
Right. No, absolutely not. No, I'm just kidding.
That's fair. Your answer. Yeah, that's okay.
It's an art form. That's why it's nonlinear, non-time bound.
Yeah.
And we are reading energy from the quantum field. That's what's happening. It's the energy between the atoms is where we're soliciting or receiving this. And as a result, it takes, like a musician or like a painter, it takes experience after experience to trust and know. And this is why I teach this everyday intuition workshop once a month, so that people can come together and practice with their intuition. And they're so new at it and they hit so incredibly well because they don't have any BS in front of them saying, don't do that, don't do that. I've learned this. They just flow with it. It astounds me. So it's easy right out of the box for us, but we make it so complex. And I will say to you, when I had good personal intuition, I knew things and it was protective and all these things until my intuition came in to read for other people. And then my ability would pull back and I wouldn't be able to have it naturally for myself and it would move forward. And I think most people experience a push and pull, and there's some energetic reasons with that too, that your intuition is stronger for you at certain times and not so strong at other times. And you can ask those questions too and say, why is that, universe? Show me. I mean, that's very powerful because then you start to realize I'm not so good in November, whatever the answer is. Yeah. But ultimately, it's getting that refinement of understanding the ability to make sense of the sense. Awesome. And put, feeling the finesse of that. And that sounds kind of open-ended, but it's really, you said something earlier, Luke, I forgot, that was like, that part is mental. Well, the doing is mental. The being is all about intuition. We could liken that to feminine energy, that it's more, intuition is more natural, not necessarily to women, not in this lifetime for sure, but just to our feminine energy and connecting to that, letting go if you can't find the answer, not rushing at it, because that's too masculine for this process of art is sometimes accidents, like, right? But we can build upon the thing that we've learned and build upon that and build upon that. And it literally took me 2 decades of consistent opportunities. So what I say to people is, in 10 years, the reader I'll be. And what I mean by that is, for you listening to this, when you start, you become better and better and better and better, and you learn your way. And if you need support, I mean, you can check out where I am and come and join us at Everyday Intuition, where it is this passive way for you to connect into your own way of doing it. Because I feel like Luke's way of doing it, Amy's way of doing it, Jenny's way of doing it, Carrie, those are the best ways. That's why we all are here and unique. And we need everybody's intuition, because you might pick up on things I don't pick up on, and vice versa. Yeah. Absolutely.
So well spoken, such well-spoken wisdom. So thank you very much, Amy, for that. If anybody's intuition right now is just going bing, 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 I really want to connect with Amy, what's the best way for them to do that? Where can they look you up? Tell them how.
I have a website. It's just my name. So Amy, A-M-Y, and then Vasterling. It's a big one. It's V as in Victor, A as in Amy, and then Sterling like the metal. So Vasterling, amyvasterling.com.
Awesome. And you have monthly workshops, you were saying?
I do. So the Wisdom Gathering is held monthly. I have a membership with that too. If you want more, it's actually less expensive than paying monthly. And then this Everyday Intuition will resume in September. And it is, I don't know when this will be published and all the things are happening, Luke, but it is quite auspicious, not to pressure people, but if you're feeling it, between August 1st of this year, 2021, until September 14th, the energy is auspicious to have a reading, and it really applies to January of 2022. We are doing some massive shifting, and August has always been a catalyst for like the past, 5 or 6 years. So if you're feeling it, I would highly encourage checking in on that.
I would too, and I'll make sure to put the links in the write-up and all of that. With that, it has been an honor. Thank you so much for sharing your story and your insight. And is there any final words, any last thing you'd like to share with the audience?
Yeah, go to it. You have it. It's already innately in you, so it's not something you can avoid. You maybe have avoided it, but it's no longer taboo. It really isn't. So run after it.
Tap into that limitless intuition. Get out there and shine your light.
Awesome. Right on, people.
I love it. And elevate. Yes. Yeah. Awesome. All right, Amy, thank you again so much for your time today. And I look forward to continuing to connect with you in the future. It has been an honor, and take care. We'll talk soon.
You too. Thanks so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Bye-bye.
Bye.